In today's video I'm going to be talking about urbandori, which is similar to Yamadori, but it's bonsai material that's collected from people's gardens. I'm going to talk a bit about a common disease that I've recently encountered, and I'm going to tell you about the trick that I use to get an almost unlimited supply of free bonsai material. What's happening, bonsai friends? It's Darren here, and I've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to tell you all about the process that I've recently been using to get lots of leads for bonsai material from people's gardens, and how I've ended up with a queue of people waiting for me to come and take away their hedges or their shrubs and use it to fuel my bonsai addiction. So stay tuned till the end and I'll give you all the details of how I've done it. Let's go and get started. I've got a privet that needs to be potted up. I've got loads actually. I dug up a whole hedge and I really need to get them into pots. Anyway, let's dive in. Okay, so this is the privet that I'm going to be potting up today. The first task is going to be to reveal the root ball. I'll bare root the tree and then we'll come in and have a look at the root system and we'll go from there. Alright, so I've got rid of all that mud, and as you can see we've got a nice big thick taproot down here, so I think the next job is going to be to cut that out to some of these nice fine feeder roots that we've got. I'm going to come in and cut away these thicker roots. They're going to get in the way of the saw. I know that they're not needed. So looking at the position of these feeder roots, I think I will be able to get the saw in at about this level. That's going to give me plenty of root to work with, but reduce the height of the root ball down to a depth that would be suitable for a bonsai training pot. Let's do that then. I'm going to use this thick root as a gauge for where I want to be cutting. There's plenty of fine feeder root above that. That's going to be perfect. Right, now I can actually feed my saw through a gap here, missing a lot of those fine roots. Okay, so that's the taproot separated. So now that I've done that, I just want to talk to you about a disease that I came across when I collected this privet hedge. If anybody has seen my posts over on Instagram, you'll probably know that I had a bit of a saga with it. I first spotted it after potting several trees, and I posted my findings about the disease and that it's fatal a lot of the time. And then Ramon, who used to work with Graham Potter, sent me a message telling me that actually if you remove the fungus, if you remove the fungal material and pot it up, keep it on the dry side, he has a lot of success with doing that. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today. So let's come in close and I'll show you the signs and the symptoms so that if you come across the same, you'll know what you've got and how others have dealt with it and had success. Alright, so I just thought I should quickly mention, hopefully it goes without saying, but if you encounter material in your garden that's infected with any kind of disease, whether that be fungal or bacterial or anything else, it's up to you to make the call on how you handle that and how you move forward and the precautions that you take. Obviously I can't take any responsibility for any issues that you encounter, either as a result of watching this video or implementing any of the advice that I've been given yourself. Hopefully that goes without saying, but I just thought I'd mention to make sure. In a bit, I'm going to tell you how you can go about getting loads and loads of leads so that you can get lots of free bonsai material for your hobby, but we'll talk about that in a bit. The symptoms to look out for are these. The symptoms to look out for are these black root-like structures called rhizomorphs. They look like dead, rotten roots, but actually, if you smell them, they've got a very strong mushroomy aroma. And another telltale sign is white, powdery, dry mycelium underneath the bark near ground level. The honey fungus also produces honey-coloured toadstools in the autumn time, but for our purposes, the most obvious signs are these black rhizomorphs. They're quite unmistakable. So I'm just going to remove as much as I possibly can of these black rhizomorphs. I've got some fishing forceps that are really helpful in getting up close and personal. Hopefully not dislodging roots while I go. Yeah, it's just a laborious case of working through the tree and getting as much as you can, I think. I'm not sure whether to risk disturbing the ones that I've already potted. It's probably a case of damned if I do and damned if I don't, but I'll have a think about that. That's the taproot cleaned up. I've cut back some of the structural roots. I've just spotted a broken one here. Let's just cleanly cut that. Cut back the structural roots that needed to be cut back. Remove the taproot. I'll get this one potted up, and then I'll tell you about how I've gone about getting so many leads for people wanting me to come and dig up their hedges. Rather than risk jeopardising this root over here by tying off to it, I'm going to come up and over the trunk this side, and I'm going to use this thick structural piece to tie down this side. I think we'll have a bit of a wobble, so it might be that I have to prop it up a bit just to stop that side to side movement. Okay, so I'm not going to bother too much about the angle and whatnot. I just need to get this one into some soil so it can start recovering from the collection process. So I'm going to get it into this container. I'll plant it as shallow as I can with as little soil as I can. Get it nice and rock solid and stable, and then we'll do our best to help it recover. Here are the tie down wires. We've got one end quite short, which is going to tie off to the low down structural root, and then at the other end we've got a couple of long pieces to go up and over the trunk. So pass the long piece through, then the short piece. That's wire one. Same again, long piece and the short piece. Thin layer of substrate. So the tree's going to go in something like this. I just want a small mound where the flat cut is. I'm going to try and place the flat saw cut onto that small mound of soil, just so that we can get rid of any air pockets underneath that bit. Nice wiggle to settle it down like so. Now I'm just going to align these wires to this structural root, trying my best to make sure not to crush any of those fine feeder roots. We don't want to crush any of those. I'll just roughly get those wires into position. And the same with these longer wires. Then I've got some mountain bike inner tubing just to act as a cushion. Again, get that just very loosely tied off for the time being. At the moment, because we're only secured in two places opposite each other, we've got this rocking motion, and I'm just going to secure a little piece of bamboo just down in a little divot in the trunk. And once these wires are tightened down, that support is going to stop any rocking. Okay, so let's shorten these wires, make them just a little bit easier to work with. And I'll tighten them down. Same this side. So this inner tube looks terrible. It's only temporary. I think this trunk will probably be removed. It's just to minimise any damage, just in case I change my mind. It's not going to be on there forever. There we go. That's nice and snug. This end. That end's also nice and snug. Do we have any? Now let's just check for movement. There we go. Let's just trim down these wires. That one out the way, and that one out the way. Perfect. So now it's a case of backfilling with the substrate that I'm using, which is molar clay in the large grain size. It is quite a wet substrate. I know a lot of people use pumice for collected trees, but that's going to get very expensive very quickly if we're talking about a whole hedge. Fill in any air pockets. Be careful not to dislodge the prop that I've got down here. Okay, that's this one potted up. I'll take it outside, water it in, and then I'll tell you about how I go about getting leads for interesting bonsai material like this for free. Alright, so here's how I go about sourcing new leads for urbandori or garden collected material that hopefully you could also put into practice to gain more bonsai material for your hobby. So if I head over onto Facebook, I'll do a search for any groups that are involved in any kind of exchange or waste reduction, or even the buy and sell groups. And so once I've found one or two groups that look likely, I'll put a little ad explaining that I would like to come and dig up any unwanted shrubs or small trees or hedges. And I'll also put a little bit about what I'm going to use that material for, so that they've got an idea that I'm not just some weirdo who likes digging stuff up. And also I like to give a little bit of reassurance that I'm not in any way in it to make a fast buck out of stuff that they could sell themselves, if you see what I mean. And just to tug on the heartstrings, I make the very valid point that if they're thinking of ripping out a hedge or getting rid of some unwanted shrubs, they might as well let me come in and take it away for them, because rather than it going to waste, being killed or composted or put into landfill or what have you, or burned or whatever, that I'll actually come in and I'll revive the plant material and actually put it to another good use. I just think it's reassuring for people to know that these living organisms, these plants, get a chance to live on and become useful and enjoyed by someone else, rather than just being chucked on the bonfire. In terms of the types of groups that I've had success with, I've actually got one locally that is very nicely aligned with what I'm trying to achieve. Obviously I'm not going to tell you the exact group because I've got to keep one or two things under my hat, but the group is involved with reducing waste. So there's a lot of people looking to exchange unwanted things or give away stuff that will be reused instead of being sent to landfill. And that aligns really nicely with my agenda, if you like, in the sense that I'm trying to reduce the amount of plants that just get wanged in the rubbish heap. So on the group that I've been using, I've now placed 2 wanted ads, and out of those 2 ads I've got numerous leads. Quite a lot were plants that I don't, quite a lot of the leads were plants and hedges that I wouldn't be able to put to good use. For instance, there were 1 or 2 Leylandii hedges that I wouldn't be confident to dig up and get them to survive, and also another one was a cherry laurel which has huge leathery leaves which doesn't appeal to me, so I had to pass on those. You can be a little bit picky, you don't have to dig up every hedge that you get offered. Another tip is to ask them to send you a picture, because you get a lot of people who like the idea of you digging up the hedge, but I noticed that only a certain percentage of people that say, oh yes please, can you come and dig this up, will actually follow through. By asking for a picture you get that commitment, and you can see that they're serious about you digging up the plants, and it just means that you waste a lot less time chasing up people who are never actually going to complete. So in terms of the ethics of collecting, I'm not an expert collector. I'm not going to go into any detail about how to do a successful dig. I'm not going to tell you about the aftercare. There are other resources to look into. What I would say is bear in mind that you're digging up someone's garden, so make sure you have a look at the hedge or the shrubs or whatever before you start. Make sure that you have the capability to extract it and leave the garden in an acceptable state afterwards, but also to get rid of any waste materials. For instance, if you're digging up a hedge, you'd be surprised, even if it's a small hedge, you'd be surprised how much waste you have to cut off just to get the trees out of the ground. Obviously it's not very fair to cut all that stuff off and leave a great big heap in someone's garden, so make sure that you can get rid of the rubbish or agree with the owner before you start hacking it to pieces, and do your best to clean up afterwards. Obviously I don't think anyone's expecting you to dig a new bed and plant it up with fresh new flowers or whatever, but try to leave it in a clean state so that people will be happy with what you've done, and you'll just get more leads, I think, in the future that way.